Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Rick's Garage. I am of course your host Rick the Welder, and today we are in the middle of Miss Vicky's big brake upgrade. For those of you who may have missed the last episode, I've already gone ahead and torn the front brakes apart and done the comparison between the OE and the new Wilwoods that are going on. I'll leave a link to that video down in the description, but for those of you who are caught up, let's get started in adding some Wilwood performance. So in the mounting kit is included your bolts and a bunch of these spacers. After putting together the driver's side, I found that the best alignment was with two 035, which go in between the bracket and the back of the upright on the spindle. I'm going to bolt this together snug with no Loctite until I can confirm 100% that these are the correct shims, and then everything gets some red Loctite to lock it down permanently. Next step is to install the hub-centric ring, and this ring you'll notice has kind of like a step on it, and according to the instructions, the smaller of the two faces outwards towards the rotor. So I've gone ahead of time and put some Never Sees around the edge of the hub just to make sure that there's no rust issues in the future. And I found this one actually pops on pretty nicely. The other one gave me a bit of hassle, and just kind of get a mallet and very gently tap it on in place. Because what you want to make sure is that this is seated completely against the bottom of the hub. And the reason for that is if it does not, then your fancy new rotor is not going to sit properly. It'll end up running out warped and you'll have premature wear. Okay, once the rotor's on, loosely put 3 lug nuts just to make sure that it doesn't go anywhere. Once you've got the rotor loosely bolted on, give it a quick spin. And if you hear that, that means that your dust plate is making contact with the rotor. Had the same problem with the driver's side, and all it was a matter to fix it was just very gently giving a little bit of persuasion on that thing to kind of bend it back away from the spinning rotor. With a little bit of persuasion, we clear all of the contact point. Okay, so this next step is to double check to see if the spacers that you've put in between the upright bracket and the spindle are the correct amount, and what we're going to do is mount the caliper and double check to make sure that the alignment is correct, that the rotor sits at dead center of the caliper. Just using some standard motor oil. Important because they're really fine threads, so they can probably strip up pretty easily. In the mounting kit with the calipers, they come with the retaining nuts, which are an 11mm 12 point. Now that this is in place, what you're going to do is take a close look, use something visual like the slider plates. Your best bet is to measure on either side to make sure that that rotor is sitting in the center of the caliper. So this one looks good. We have to pull this all apart and then put some Loctite on those main mounting bolts for the caliper bracket. As well, they also come with these shims that sit underneath the caliper. That'll be the second thing that we're going to check. On the other side, I actually found that the best fit was with no shims, but be aware that that's what they're there for. Now with the bar removed, you're going to very carefully slide the brake pads in between the caliper and the brake rotor. As with every braking surface, be very mindful not to actually touch the friction surface of the brake pads with your greasy gloves. All right, so the measurement that we're looking for is we want to compare the outer circumference of the brake pad with the outer circumference of the rotor. They should be matching as close as possible. Adding shims will extend the caliper out in order to get the best lineup possible. In this case, I'm in luck. Much like the other side, it needed no shims whatsoever. We'll get a close-up picture of this so you guys will see what I'm talking about. Once you've verified that the caliper is in the right spot, to lock the brake pads in, reinstall the tube. This should be tight enough so that you don't have any free play of the bolt or the tube. And then the caliper mounting hardware gets torqued down. All right, caliper's mounted. Let's swing the camera around back and look at how the brake line connects. All right, so Wilwood provides a little 90 that goes in here, which will connect to the flared fitting of the stainless steel brake line included in the line kit. And I wanted to touch on one important part. I don't know how well this sticker shows up, but it does say that this inlet is NPT, or National Pipe Thread. The important thing to know about this, although normally you would never use any type of sealant on a braking system, because it's NPT thread, If done perfectly correct, the NPT threads will seal on themselves. However, these 90s, I'm sure, are produced by the thousands, so what I've done is put a couple small rounds of sealing tape along with some pipe dope compound before I thread this in. Make note, if you do this, you do not get any of that sealant around the actual port, because if you introduce any of that into the braking system, it's going to cause some problems. Okay, so I got myself a 7/16 wrench to make sure that I don't put any excess pressure and do any damage to this brass fitting. And I'm going to have this oriented so that it's facing up, same as the factory caliper. Then the brake line has a flared fitting, which will go onto the end of this 90 with no sealant required. With the new brake line loosely attached to the caliper, it's going to route something like this, and this goes up to the factory brake line coupling where it attaches to the flex line. Now you'll notice that I've changed my gloves, and that's specifically because anytime that you're working with brake fluid, you want to use single-use gloves and get rid of them as soon as possible. Brake fluid is extremely caustic and it's very bad for paint. It will start eating away at it very, very quickly. So the last thing that you want is to get gloves contaminated by absorbing brake fluid and then potentially touch something on your car and ruin the finish. What we're going to do is try to do a quick change as quickly as possible to pop it into the new brake line. What I'm going to do is just break this loose with a 10mm wrench. As soon as it's free, then I'm going to pop this retaining clip out, and then we'll be able to do the swap. Now as well, when you make this swap, make sure that the cap on your master cylinder is closed. That will help maintain a little bit of a vacuum in the system, and it'll minimize the fluid loss. And to do the final snug down, you're going to need an 11/16 wrench on the bottom and then the 10mm on top. Put in the new retaining clip to hold the new flex line in. Attach the bracket. You're going to want to have the appropriate amount of slack in this end, and the easiest way to tell is just to rotate the steering as if you're going lock to lock. Make sure that nothing's going to be binding, and you're good to go. So after we bleed the system, that wraps up the installation of the new brakes. All right, my compliments to Wilwood for a very well put together kit. That install was pretty straightforward, although something to keep in mind, Wilwood's break-in or bedding process of the brake pads is pretty complicated. It involves a series of light to medium to heavy acceleration and deceleration to heat cycle the brakes and rotors. Now for safety concerns, make sure that you've got a lot of wide open streets, or better yet a dyno, in order to do this bedding process. When the process is finished, you want to look for a very even wear pattern on the rotors. All that powder coating is going to be gone. If you end up with blotchiness or discoloration, you're going to have to remove the rotors and send them out to get machined true. The actual steps on the bedding process would be included in your Wilwood kit and are available online, so make sure that you check it out to see if this is something that you're willing to do yourself. Overall, I'm very happy with the performance of this kit. Admittedly, it does generate a little bit more noise than factory, but the brakes grab harder, they were responsive, there's no brake fade. I'm very, very pleased with what this kit can do. Also, when phase 2 is finished and all the power adders are done, I think that's when this kit's really going to shine. So that's it for now. As always, thanks very much for watching, guys, but stay tuned for the continuation of phase 1 of Miss Vicky's transformation.